We didn't make these laws. We didn't decide what the statutes say. Tim doesn't decide what his defense is. Every psychiatrist that has met with Tim to talk about how he was on August the 28th, 2014, has said he was psychotic. They disagree about why, but they all said he was psychotic. Even the court's expert, Dr. Frierson, says that he felt morally justified in doing what he did. But he had the capacity to know different. It doesn't make any sense to me. To know, to believe that one thing is right, and to know it's wrong. But that's why we have juries. That's why you have to make the decision. Killing children that you love is insane. A brain disease that can make you think that that's the right thing to do is a nightmare. But it's what Tim has. Yes, Tim told some untruths. He tried to buy time. He tried to hide. And after the unintentional death of Natan, what did Tim say? What were his words? I think they were going to have issues like me. I thought they were going to be like me. I thought that they'd be better off in heaven than being like me. Does it make sense? No. He's crazy. You can't rationalize crazy. But at the time, he thought it was the right thing to do. Everyone says that Tim loved his kids. Every witness you heard from says that Tim loves his kids. And tragic, horrific, that love killed him. He thought they would be better off. His diseased mind believed that the punishment of the time was not only legal, but ordained by God. It is what you're supposed to do. He did not appreciate the legal wrongfulness of his conduct and this discipline of the time. His diseased mind believed that Mira, Eli, Gabriel, and Elaine were better off in heaven than living. He did not appreciate the moral wrongfulness of his conduct, and that is insane. If you look at the whole story, the whole forest that Mr. Hubbard wants to belittle Mr. Madison for making that metaphor, but if you look at the whole forest, not just a couple of trees, this is a forest of insanity. Tim had a diseased and damaged brain, and Spice and Chantix were like pouring gasoline on a fire. The defense is trying to tell you the whole story. Here's everything that was in the call. Here's all the pictures from the house. Here's stuff that the state didn't collect from the house, but the defense did. We've done everything that we can to show you the whole story, not just a few pieces, not just a few trees. If you look at his whole life, Frierson tells you He wants to believe that he's mentally ill. He needs to believe that he's mentally ill to live with what he's done. But if you look at his whole life, that doesn't make any sense. He's been brain damaged and crazy long before 2014. Where does it start? Where do you start his story? Where do you first look? His story starts with his genetics. It starts with his family. It starts with his mother. And we told you, every witness has told you, that schizophrenia is a highly inheritable disease. Tim's mother has one of the most untreatable forms of schizophrenia that any of these experts have ever seen. Frierson says that she's on a medication of last resort for the treatment of schizophrenia. Having one parent with schizophrenia makes you 10, 15 times more likely to develop the disease. And then what did Dr. Roy tell you? He's got 20 other family members with serious mental illness. What does that do to his odds of developing schizophrenia? It increases them exponentially. The environment that Tim was raised in was one of abuse, neglect, violence. That environment, we know, and it's uncontested, increases the odds of somebody developing schizophrenia, especially a person who is already genetically loaded for the disease. That soil, the seed, was watered with neglect and abandonment. We know that that increases his odds of developing schizophrenia. His already fragile and genetically loaded brain suffered a further injury when he was a passenger of a car, and through no fault of his own, the car got in a wreck, and he suffered a head injury. You've seen the head injury, you've seen the extent of the damage. It's not just a cracked skull, it's not just a skull fracture. There's still blood in the skull. His hippocampus is damaged, his corpus callosum is damaged. You've seen the images, you have copies of them. Tim didn't choose his genetics, Tim didn't choose his environment, Tim didn't choose to have a traumatic brain injury. But what did Dr. Snyder tell you about his brain injury? He told you that the brain in these images is positively correlated to schizophrenia. He says that's not diagnostic of, that doesn't mean that he has it. Positive correlation is like looking at two parents, saying, well, you two are tall, that you'll have tall kids. That's positive correlation. The next step from positive correlation to diagnostic of, it's something that we're not to yet. But Dr. Bigler's working on it. Dr. Bigler also told you what Tim's damaged brain anatomy says about his future. Yes, he said it was a broken brain. He also told you that every behavior has an anatomy. Every emotion, every action originates in our brain. He told you about when people have brain injuries, just like Dr. Barker said, how do people see people with brain injuries? They're jerks. They think they're jerks. That's a brain injury. It's not a personality. They want you to believe that he's just mean, Tim's just mean. Just ignore the uncontested fact of a brain injury. That doesn't matter. Tim didn't choose to have a brain injury. It's no surprise that growing up in an environment like that, that Tim started experimenting with marijuana. What everybody thought of as innocent teenager experimentation, what nobody knew at the time was that teenage experimentation with marijuana significantly increases the chances of developing schizophrenia. If there's a risk factor for developing schizophrenia, Tim has it. There's not a single risk factor that he doesn't have in spades. Tim's brain damage, his wreck. It didn't do anything to him. He was fine. He was doing good in school. He went to Mississippi. He got a job at Intel. His father told you that he changed. He went from a nerd to somebody with an I don't care attitude. He went from a straight A student to somebody who's getting in trouble and having bad grades. That's a significant change. That's an impact from his brain injury. So what does Tim do? He joins the Navy. He's going to be a Navy SEAL. He washes out in 44 days. And they all say, well, his hip was bothering him. Must have been his hip. He must have been depressed about not being a Navy SEAL because of his hip. Except for the fact that his hip is not mentioned in any record. There's no record from the Navy saying he's complaining about his hip. There's no form from some commanding officer saying he's not able to make the run, he's not able to jump, he's not able to do the pull-ups, he's not able to do the sit-ups. That's not in there. What's in there? He's isolated. He's crying. His moods are cycling. He gets diagnosed with a depressive disorder around the age of 19 or 20, which the state's expert agrees is often a precursor to a major mental illness, a depressive disorder diagnosis. They knew about his drug use because they gave him a waiver for it. He told them about it beforehand. When Tim leaves the Navy, he gets kicked out of the Navy. He starts self-medicating or treating his depression with drugs and alcohol. And he gets arrested. He steals a couple of cars. He gets arrested for powder cocaine. He steals money, steals a checkbook from his father. He has drug paraphernalia. And his dad says, I'm going to leave you in there. You're going to have to stay. I'm not bailing you out. And Tim goes to a boot camp. But unlike a military boot camp, a boot camp which Tim completes without ever complaining about his hip. And in that boot camp, he finds a new way to cope with what's been going on with him. He finds the Bible. He finds a new instruction manual. But it's not just any form of religion that he finds. He finds fundamentalist interpretation of the Bible, which is the literal and unalterable word of God. It's his instruction manual. It gives him a purpose in life. It tells him who he is. It tells him how to handle every situation. It told him that he was loved. It's where he found his identity. It was a release from his abandonment. It calmed the fire in his mind. And when he got out, he went and joined Pastor Sutton's church. And you heard from Pastor Sutton. Tim was the only member of the church who could annoy the whole congregation. He had a prodigious ability to memorize scripture, but couldn't apply it. All he could do was tell everybody else what they were supposed to be doing. That's his disease. Eventually, Tim meets Amber, and Dr. Haynes told us Tim bloomed like a rose. They stayed members of the church. Pastor Sutton married. Eventually, Tim accuses Pastor Sutton's wife of trying to seduce him, and Pastor Sutton gives up. He says, I can't work with you anymore. I'm tired of trying to get through to you. I'm tired of the 2 a.m. phone calls. They move on. But he did tell Pastor Sutton one thing. He told Pastor Sutton about the monster inside of him, the monster inside of him trying to get out, which he was able to relieve through speaking in tongues and other church rituals. Pastor Sutton told you that Tim used the Bible to translate a world in which he did not understand. That's his damaged and diseased brain trying to make sense of things. Tim and Amber started a family, and they found another, the Godly Seed. This is a book by a guy named Denny Kensington on how to raise kids. If you follow this guide, your kids will be well behaved, they will be obedient, they will love you, they will never want to leave you. This is what Brother Denny has to say about raising children.
Let's look at some more verses here. Let's turn to Proverbs 23, first of all, and read verse 13 and 14. Proverbs 23. Withhold not correction from the child, for if thou beatest him with a rod, he shall not die. Thou shalt beat him with the rod, and shalt deliver his soul from hell. Obedience is a matter of the will. It is clear to me in that these verses deal with the will of our child. Notice first, again, God repeats what he has already said to us. And I've noticed this when I study the Bible. When you find God saying the same thing over and over again, he is trying to get your attention. But notice what he says. Withhold not correction from the child. He already said that once. Why does he have to say that again? Because there is a tendency in us to withhold the correction. So God says it again to get our attention. The second half of this verse has two interpretations, and both of them are worthy, so I'll give them both to you. First of all, the first interpretation is that it ministers to our tendency to hold back. In other words, don't hold back from correcting your child. The child will not die. You know, sometimes children act like they're gonna die when they're getting a spanking. Sometimes they sound like they're gonna die when they're going to get a spanking. But God says, don't worry about it. They're not gonna die. If you do it the way that I told you last evening, you don't have to have any worry in your mind. They're not gonna die. Don't hold back because you hear sounds that sound like a child is going to die. That's one of the interpretations. And that's worthy. That's good for us to hear. Again, God is reminding us. The second interpretation is this: you will save the child from an early death brought on by a reckless life. Now that's also a worthy interpretation in light of the commandments that we just looked at. If you withhold correction from your child will live a reckless life, and a reckless life is a shortened life. So, either one of those interpretations are worthy. If you beat the child with a rod, you will save the child from an early death because they have lived a reckless life. That's the other interpretation. But look at the next verse. This is a very sobering verse because of one word in that verse, and that is the word hell. The word hell. Thou shalt deliver his soul from hell. Listen to that, brothers and sisters. That is a commandment. God says to us, thou shalt deliver his soul from hell, God says. That's a commandment, by the way. That's a commandment. Notice again, we are given commands, not suggestions. Two of them. See then, the two of them there? Thou shalt spank, and thou shalt deliver. Both of those are commandments. Ah, beautiful commandments in the Word of God. I see goals and purposes in these commandments, and they go far beyond giving a spanking for punishment. I see goals and purposes here.
Tim's diseased and damaged brain, what Brother Denny was selling was as poisonous as what he was getting at the time. The rational mind can say, well, I understand that, I understand what he means. Tim couldn't. It was divinely inspired, and that's what he had to do. Tim and Amber moved to South Carolina, and they bought a trailer, and they were going to homestead, and Tim was following his instructions, and everything was going to be great. But when they got there, everything immediately fell apart. The homestead failed, his marriage failed. He'd done what he was supposed to do, and he couldn't figure out why it was going wrong. It was going wrong because of his diseased and damaged brain. His symptoms got so impaired that it impaired his ability to work, and he sought professional help. He went to Dr. Hayes. He knew he couldn't tell her about the voices. He told her about the monster inside. The monster that he was able to soothe with his religion. The monster that Amber couldn't be around. That's schizophrenia. When he and Amber split up, he moved his kids to Mississippi to be with his parents for the summer, and he lived with a couple of coworkers. And they told you about Tim's disease and about his brain damage. They told you he was weird, that he was strange, that he had strict religious views, that he couldn't pick up on social cues, that he didn't have a filter, that he was irrational. He was a tinfoil hat type. He was paranoid about Facebook. He didn't have any friends, and they didn't want anybody thinking that they were his friend. They let him stay there because they felt sorry for him. He isolated himself. And when he started to act weird, he told them, I'm on medication from a vasectomy, so that explains why I'm acting weird. But they also told him that he loved his kids, that he was devoted to his kids, that he talked about his kids, he doted on his kids, and every Friday after work, he got in his car and he drove back to Mississippi with his kids, and every Sunday night, After he put them to bed, he drove back to arrive in time at work on Monday morning. At the end of summer of 2014, at the end of the summer of 2012, Tim moved his kids back into a trailer, 2155 South Lake Drive. He wanted them to be in the school district. He wanted them to go to the Lexington County Schools. He got babysitters to help, and you heard from Ruby and Jody Durney. They said Tim was a fantastic father. His disease was waning, and he was able to pull it together. He had what they needed. He was very thoughtful about what they needed. He had the diaper bag packed. They said he was better than most mothers. And while he was upset about the divorce, Amber was pregnant, so he didn't need their services anymore because he and Amber were going to try again. They were going to try and make it work. We know that that didn't work. And by the end of 2012, Crystal Valentine had moved in. And she was having to take care of the kids. Her and her daughter had moved in. And you know that Tim had changed. He was a very different person. He was controlling. He was telling her what to buy, telling her what to wear. He was spanking the kids. It's also the time when Elaine, his infant daughter, came to stay with him. Now, Crystal has changed her story. Crystal, when she talked to the police, said that Tim was talking to himself like he was answering somebody else. That's what she wrote in her statement. You heard it. You heard Detective Black. Then she meets with the prosecutors. She changes her story. She originally says she heard Tim in a room, heard two voices coming from a room. He was not on the phone. There's not a TV. She was adamant about it. She meets with the prosecutors. She changes her story. Detective Black said she wrote it as she said it. She's not making it up. That's schizophrenia. She left the house. She moved out. Tim was too strict. But she came back a couple of times. And what she saw when she came back shows you that Tim's mental illness was getting worse. He was unkempt. He was dirty. He looked like a bum. She had to cut his hair, shave him, make him put on clean clothes. That's schizophrenia. She even told the police that he started acting like he had mental problems, obsessing about the kids, studying everything. His disease is getting worse. In Christmas of 2012, Tim took the kids to meet with his dad. He took him to Mississippi. And his dad knew something was off. His dad saw Tim spanking the kids and preaching to them. He saw, as the child learns what God's purposes are for the spanking, he will yield and give in to what he is receiving. He will learn to let it do its work in him and get done sooner. There must be enough pain to drive the evil out of the heart. His dad tried to pacify him. His dad tried to walk on eggshells around him, but they couldn't do it. And on Christmas Eve, after a fight about whether or not you can read A Night Before Christmas or the Bible, Tim packs up his family and leaves. And the solicitor's right. Tim is so stubborn, so rigid in his thinking, that he doesn't talk to his dad again for another year and a half. That's brain damage. When you head into the end of the 2014 school year, and Mira and Eli and Natan are finishing up school, and they've had the type of problems that you would normally expect for kids to have while parents are going through a contentious divorce. There's been some lying, there's been some stealing. Normal kid problems when you have a contentious divorce. But Tim doesn't see them as normal problems. Tim sees them as I haven't driven the evil out of their heart. That's his mental illness. That's his coping mechanism. This is on him, his fault. Then say, well, did take him to therapy. You had taken him to therapy before. He blames himself. And he gets more strict with the kids. Natan shows up at school with a bruise on his chin. We don't dispute that. We put that in. Tim's disease is getting worse. DSS comes out. They meet with the children. They meet with Tim at the police department. They follow Tim from the police department to his house, where they go into his house, and they notice that excessive religious items around his house. They check his house for food. There aren't any bruises on the other kids. They put in place a safety plan. A safety plan that says no corporal punishment. Tim believes that he is told by God that he has to spank. He's not going to listen to a safety plan. He's not going to interpret corporal punishment as biblical correction. Tim's saying, I don't beat my kids. I give them biblical correction. The school knew and had seen all the signs of mental illness. They knew he was weird. They knew he was strange. They knew that when Mira had lice, he said, well, I'll use kerosene and a heat gun. They knew about his disciplinary problems. They knew that he had told people at the school to lock Eli up for taking a pencil to make Mira go spend a day with a school resource officer for taking a cookie. That's why they call it DSS. After they got out of school, that summer was the summer with Joy Lorick, where they went to Myrtle Beach. You saw the video. And they went to Disney. You saw the pictures. They left Disney, as Joy said, because of the coming storm, not to attempt to get some fix. But Joy told you that when she got there, when she arrived, she first saw a dirty, roach-filled house with literally no food in it. That's mental illness. That's schizophrenia. And Tim had started to add to his disease and his brain damage with spikes. A drug that you've heard time and time again exacerbates the signs of mental illness, the symptoms of mental illness. DSS doesn't send him to a parenting class, doesn't make him do a counseling session. They don't do anything. They close the case with no services offered. When they come back, he has the kids go to Christina Elke's house, next door neighbor, the one who lived right around the corner. What does she tell you about Tim? She tells you that he's a good father, that he's weird, that he has strange ideas about the Bible, that he was scatterbrained and changed his mind a lot. He never had any visitors at all. These are all signs and symptoms of mental illness. What about when the state asked Christina Elke about what Mary told her about her mom. My mom doesn't want us. Now the state wanted her to say that it was Tim saying mom didn't want her. But that's not what she said. What she said was, Tim said, tell her what your mom said, and Mary's response was, my mom doesn't want us. What matters is, it's what Tim believed. In his brain damaged and diseased mind, he believed it to be true. He believed that their mother didn't want her. Finally, they went to Atlanta, first weekend in August, to meet with their great-grandparents, Roberta and Larry. You saw the video from that meeting. You heard about Tim and Roberta's concerns about Tim at that meeting. She knew something was wrong. She knew that Tim was not well. She's seen enough mental illness in her life to know it when she sees it. And what's the first thing that she does? She gets on the phone with Tim's dad and says, you gotta call him. You're both hard-headed, don't care, apologize, gotta get in touch with him. He's going downhill. And then on August 7th, DSS comes back to the house. They take pictures of all the kids. Everybody has to raise their shirt. The Tom raised his shirt too. I don't know why. See how he thought he didn't. There's food in the house. DSS takes pictures of the house. But Tim doesn't know where the complaint comes from. Tim doesn't know that it's Joy's Lawrence friend, Mary Tanner, calling and reporting what Joy told him. Tim doesn't know if it's children conspiring against him or somebody else. All he knows is that DSS is coming back. His paranoia is going up. His disease is coming out. What do we know about how he was doing at work during this time? Jim McConnell tells you his work was suffering. He was changing. He was haggard. He had lost a lot of weight. He had started smoking. He was different. And you also know that he was using Chantix. Not just because he had boxes of it in his house, but because of the searches, phone searches that the state wants to talk about. You see him search for, can I use my health savings account money for Nicorette? He's looking for things to help him stop smoking. He has boxes of Chantix at his house. The state says taking Chantix irregularly shouldn't cause anybody any problems. But if you have a mental illness and you have brain damage, it can. Taking it irregularly, taking it not as prescribed, taking it without the starter pack is dangerous. That's what Dr. Litton told you. And you have the black box warning from Chantix and evidence. All patients being treated with Chantix should be observed for neuropsychiatric symptoms, including changes in behavior, hostility, agitation, depressed mood, and suicide-related events, including ideation, behavior, and attempted suicide. These symptoms, as well as worsening pre-existing psychiatric illness and completed suicide, have been reported in some patients attempting to quit smoking while taking Chantix. You also know that in the weeks leading up to August 28th, he had begun searching through Google, talking about children electrocuting themselves with outlets, talking about people being electrocuted by electricity. The state says that's just paranoia. It wasn't long enough to build up to a delusion. Nobody ever said how long it had to go on to be a delusion. When does it finally crystallize into a delusion? When does it become a delusion? When does it become a delusional belief? Is it when you go home, you're already paranoid, you believe that the kids are conspiring against you, and you try and plug something in and the socket doesn't work? Is that when it crystallizes into a delusion? Is that when it becomes a firmly held false belief? That's something you have to decide. On August 28th, 2014, Tim went to work. He went home. He went and picked up his kids. He saw the video. Solicitor Hubbard's were absolutely right. You can hear Mira saying, "Daddy, are you feeling better?" Tim's being a normal parent. Nothing seems to be going on. You know from the computer records and from the phone records that he was manic, that he hadn't slept in 3 days. Why is Mira asking him, "Daddy, are you all right?" Because he hadn't been sleeping. He hadn't been sleeping himself. The voicemail that Amber leaves him after he hangs up on her, which I've been worried about you. You haven't been yourself these past 3 days. The state has done their best to block your view of the whole story. Ask yourself what they block, what they obscure, what they tried to hide. I'm asking you to see the forest for the trees. The state wants to tell you that they know what happened. Believe Tim about one part, but not the other. Solicitor Hubbard says, "I know what happened with that Woody dog." Once he was there, he doesn't. I don't know. Nobody knows how long the dog lived. Nobody testified to anything about it other than it was found in the house. That's made up. It's made up by the solicitor. There's no evidence of it. Believe Tim when he says he strangled the kids, but don't believe him when he says he didn't intend to kill in the time. Believe him when he says that the kids struggled, but don't believe him when he says that he loves them. Today, for the first time, believe him when he says he got pulled over by law enforcement the night before the 6th. But don't believe the rest. Believe him when he says, "I'll take you to the children," but don't believe him when he says, "I hear voices." That's what they're trying to do. That's what they're telling you to do. It's such an intellectually dishonest thing. Even the investigators in the case say, why would he tell us all this bad stuff? Why would he say so much damaging information and not be telling the truth about the rest? Not be telling the truth about the time? Tim's cell phone. He knows it's going to get caught. He's put the kids in the car. He's driving around. The state wants to go on and on about his cell phone. Look at his cell phone search. What is he doing on his cell phone? How about what he's not doing on his cell phone? He's not buying a plane ticket on his cell phone. He's not depositing a check on his cell phone. He's not searching on how to get away with murder. Did he search for non-extradition countries? Yes. Did he go to any of them? No. How many times did he drive past an airport with a passport and $3,500 in his pocket? It's not rational. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because it's crazy. He could have called work, called school, called his dad, called his grandmother, called the babysitter, made up an excuse, and been out of the country. If he's this genius, if he's such a smart guy, and he's so capable, and he so has everything together, why is he still here? It's 5 days before anybody even knows he's missing. He doesn't do any of that. And all these calls that they want to talk about, all these calls that he made, every single text or call that he made was in response to somebody reaching out to him. He never initiated anything. And this excuse about, well, he's got to come back to Lexington because Lexington is the only place that you can get spice. This stuff is sold in gas stations. It's not you go in and say, I need the brand with the AB knocked in. You heard a lot of testimony about how they just changed the chemical formula, add a new chemical, and it's back to being legal in that state. Even in Alabama, even in Mississippi. All you had to do is Google, hey, where is spice legal, and go to that state. He didn't do any of that. He was spending time, like Dr. Frierson told you, grieving with his children. On the 6th, after spending almost 9 days in the car, riding around the Southeast, eating, sleeping, stopping to change the oil in his car with his children, playing Mira's favorite song, Butterfly Kisses, all with the decomposed children in the car. That's insanity. He runs into Linda Owens. What does she tell you? She says he's not high, he's not drunk. He shuffles around the store, he buys some water, he buys a Starbucks shot. And this evil genius, this master criminal planner, the guy who's already Googled himself and knows that they're looking for him, who's taking the battery out of his cell phone so that nobody can find him, pulls out his ID and pays with a credit card. That's not rational. That's not somebody who knows what they're doing. After he leaves Lynn Owens, he finds a logging road, and he pulls off, and he puts his kids in garbage bags, and he puts them out, and he prays with them, and he drives off. That's not rash. That's insane. And everybody wants to talk about, you get stopped, and everybody wants to talk about the note. I know you have a different version of the note. It has a lot of writing on it. The state says, yep, makes total sense. This isn't disorganized in any way. It's just a list of steps to take, how to do it. I'll tell you what. I will say this. I think that Dr. Frierson was right when he thought that MB stood for Myrtle Beach. To me, this makes sense. Here's Lexington. Here we are. Where's Myrtle Beach? It would be northeast. Camping in between. Las Vegas would be over here. Sort of geometrically makes sense. Geographically makes sense. And so does the smiley face. Because Myrtle Beach would be a place where he would be happy to leave his kids, a place where his kids were happy. But you have to get your own mind. Yeah, Tim said to Frierson when questioned the Mexican border. But it wouldn't be the only thing that Tim got wrong, right? Here they are. Tim's glasses that everybody's looking for. Tim's intact, abandoned, not broken, glasses that didn't drive him into a rage. Go on the floor of the house. They're left there by the police. After Tim's arrest, the next morning, he gets taken to a hospital to have blood drawn and DNA samples and hair. He meets with medical professionals to do that. Nobody says this guy's high. Nobody says this guy's drunk. Nobody says that this guy's impaired. And then that night, he had the interview with his dad and Marty Patterson. He's screaming about the voices in his head, screaming that Cindy put it in there, screaming that put a bullet in my head. And the state says that's all spice. It's all spice. He's not psychotic. He's not in any way delusional. It's just spice. Just coming down from drugs. That's all it is. And I would tell you to watch it. Decide for yourself. But they didn't take it. I guess we'll just have to take their word for it. But we do know that they said it was unlike anything they had ever seen before. Patterson told you in his own handwriting, he believes the children want to harm him. And then you have the next night, he meets with Detective Creech and Agent Mackey. If it's all spies, if it's all him coming down on some spies, and the next day he's so much better, why is he still talking about the voices? Why is he still talking about the delusions? The delusions, the paranoia, whatever you want to call it, he's still saying that Natan was trying to harm him. He's still saying that the children are conspiring against him. If you want to say it hadn't crystallized into a delusion yet, fine. But it's still what he believes. It's still psychosis, and it's still a break from reality. And they want you to ignore the questions that Detective Creech and Agent Mackey asked, where if you listen to the tape, and it's in evidence, and I hope that you do, where Detective Creech says, should we ask these questions again? And Detective Mackey, who now says those questions are ridiculous, said, absolutely. And they go through them, and they get the same responses they had before. Tim didn't know it was wrong, would have done it with a cop standing elbow to elbow with him. You know that if his answers to those questions were different, they would have been the first thing you heard about during the trial. But trust Mackey's word on not what he said before he turned on the tape, despite the fact that the first two things out of his mouth were wrong. No court order, no custody order violation. What does Tim tell him? What does he finally tell him? Why? I thought they were going to be like me. I thought they were going to have issues like me. He always maintained, always has maintained to everybody that he's met with, and to this day, that Natan was an accident. It was unintentional, not mean hurt. But that he killed Mira, Eli, Gabriel, and Elaine to save them from what he believed to be a worse fate. The worst fate of being like him. Him growing up without a mother, him having abandonment issues, him having voices. He believed he was morally justified in trying to save them. And then the next day, on the 9th, he takes them without a promise of any kind, without any hope of reward. The only promise they've given him is the child's Christian burial. He takes them to the bodies. And how does Eric Johnson tell us he acted out there on the side of the road, wailing, screaming, crying. It's not how an evil genius on the run acts. It doesn't make any sense. It's irrational. And the defense played you the tape that Detective Creech made of him and Tim on the ride back. Tim says, "This is my fault. I did this." He's not blaming anybody else. How about what Detective Creech says? "I think you loved those kids, but you did what you thought you had to do at the time." What are they saying? That Detective Creech was just trying to trick him, trying to get him to provide more information after he had confessed, after he had taken them to the bodies, after they had all the evidence. Why would he say it? He said it because it's true. It's the same reason he said to Tim, "I think you did the right thing." You had the jail intake records from Smith County where they changed the forms from intoxicated to psychotic. Psychiatric problem. There are two of them. They were changed intentionally. The other reason that you know that what Tim said was true was because of what Dr. Ross told you, the pathologist. He told you that the times of death were different because the Times still had contents in his stomach. Nobody had any injuries consistent with abuse. They x-rayed the whole body. If Tim had flown into a rage and beaten the Time, there would be evidence of it. And there's not. There's not so much as a split lip. And that's also how you know that officers Presley and Boyd are wrong when they talk about this new version that's not in any of the reports where they can't get the timeline straight. But if Mary had come in and he had killed her at the same time as the Time, they both would have had stomach contents, and they didn't. Tim gets taken straight to SCDC where he meets with Dr. Wood. He's taken there for safekeeping to keep him away from other detainees at the Lexington County Detention Center. People that the state now wants you to use as your moral barometer to determine whether or not you know something is wrong or not. Dr. Wood sees him that day. She takes his drug history, she takes his family history, she learns about his head injury, and she starts him on Geodon that day. He tells her about the voices, he tells her about the psychotic symptoms, and she keeps changing his meds, she keeps adding meds. She gets up to where he's getting 18 pills a day for his time at Kirkland. He's not sick, according to the state. He's just enjoying taking all these meds. His meds continue when he gets transferred to Lee Correctional. He's taking such high doses that somebody who was not mentally ill couldn't possibly handle. Dr. Frierson says, well, the negative self-talk resolved after they added Prozac, the SSRI that he talked about. You know, that's not true because Dr. Wood, in her notes, told you that Tim said it feels weird. It feels funny without the voices, but I'd rather have the brain fog. That's before she ever starts him on Prozac. And the voices stayed gone after the Prozac was discontinued in January 2017. Dr. Wood didn't get a dime. All she does is treat patients. Every day she sees people who are trying to scam her. As the solicitor calls them, the lowest of the low. She sees more people trying to malinger mental illness than any other expert in this case. She says he's not really. His symptoms are genuine, they're consistent with a mental illness. She's diagnosed him as schizoaffective disorder because she saw mania, she saw pressured speech. She thought that that was a bipolar component to his mental illness. She says he doesn't fit neatly into any one box. The same thing that Dr. Garfar told you about people who have mental illness and a head injury. She doesn't medicate people who she doesn't believe are sick. She also told you that even if his mental illness was caused through some sort of voluntary intoxication or some sort of drug, the changes are permanent. The damage has been done. His brain is broken. Dr. Garkar, I know that state wants to pretend that they can't say his name, calling $25,000 expert. He testifies in 9% of the cases in which he consults people, because he doesn't always tell them what they want to hear. In Tim's case, he saw genuine mental illness, and he told you what schizophrenia is. He told you it's a break from reality. It's a thought disorder. It's a brain disorder. It's a brain disease. It's common to have disorganized thoughts, disorganized behavior, hallucinations, negative symptoms. And he also told you that deficits define the disease. You don't define the disease by what a person can do. You look at what they can do. Tim wasn't able to control his life. That's what he couldn't do. Yes, he could go to work. Yes, he was good on computers. What he couldn't do is go out to Wendy's without barking at someone. As a 30-year-old man. Dr. Garker also told you about listening to Tim's taped interviews, the taped interviews from before he's medicated. That's pressured speech. That's indicative of mental illness. It's a brain disease called schizophrenia, and it's definitely a nightmare. Dr. Frierson was the court's expert. He told you what Tim relayed to him, that Tim believed that Amber didn't want them and he was going to go away, so he thought it was better for them to all be together. He told you that Tim felt morally justified and he didn't want them to grow up the way he did. He also told you that Tim was remorseful and regrets it. That's why you asked for forgiveness. The state will say, well, why ask for forgiveness? Because he regrets it. He's remorseful. That doesn't mean on August the 28th, 2014, at that time and in that moment, he didn't think it was morally the right thing to do. And that's what you have to decide. Dr. Frierson thinks that Tim believing that Amber's being prostituted is perfectly rational, not delusional. That people searching, are my kids trying to betray me? Perfectly rational, not delusional. This belief that my kid might be trying to electrocute me with a socket, not a delusion, maybe a little paranoid. Brought on by the spice. We also told you that but for the spice, we wouldn't be here. And that the spice made him psychotic. Dr. Frierson told you that he diagnoses people with malingering all the time, and he didn't do it with Tim. Dorney told you about her conclusions about criminal responsibility, and she told you about schizophrenia. She talked to you about brain damage. She talked to you about when Amber called and talked to Tim's dad, talked about the changes in Tim when they moved to South Carolina, that he wasn't right. She does say that she did not consider Dr. Cruz's report, and she told you why. She said that those tests are designed to try and figure out people who are actively faking psychotic symptoms, and that Tim said he didn't have it. That's why she didn't rely on the test. Tim was not psychotic at the time that he took tests designed to determine whether or not somebody is actively trying to fake psychosis. If you're answering tests trying to determine whether or not you're actively faking psychosis, about how you used to be, you're going to come out blinking. Based on everything that she viewed, it was Dr. Dorney's conclusion that Tim was not able to appreciate the legal wrongfulness of his actions in disciplining the time, and he was not able to appreciate the moral wrongfulness of his actions in killing Mira, Eli, Gabriel, and Abigail. He was insane. Brain images, family history, all the witnesses that you've heard from support what Tim says. It's hard for me to imagine having voices inside my head telling me what to do. Sometimes good things, sometimes bad things, sometimes command delusions, sometimes commands that you have no choice but to follow. They're coming from inside your head. I can't even imagine what it's like. And I can't imagine how you would have to come to terms with what your brain made you do, what your diseased and damaged brain made you do. But I do know that every action has an anatomy. When we think about mental illness, we think about it as the loss of the ability to reason. You can't get from point A to point B. In fact, you see that there's only one inevitable outcome, just like Bryce Mikowski told you about how Tim viewed things. He would see the inevitable outcome and then get there. He only saw one inevitable outcome for his kids, and that was a tortured existence with institutionalization or worse. He thought that the only thing he could do was send them to heaven, and that they would be together, and that they would be there, and that they would one day be together again. Tim's dad knew something was wrong with him. You can tell it when he sits here today. He says, "This Timmy is the nightmare. I saw it coming. I saw it in his mother, and I see it in him." He knew something was wrong with him. Killing someone out of murder, out of hatred, is murder. Killing children out of love is insanity.
All right, let's take a few minutes, step in the jury room, don't discuss the case, get you back in here for my instruction shortly.